ready?
I'm here.
Welcome to Unlocking the Truth. We're talking about the Holy Roman Empire tonight. Welcome, Sam. Looks like we've got Cody on there, and we've got Mom on there, and Robert. Let me shut this door. I can hear Cody in the other room. All right, we had a little bit of technical difficulties, but I think we got it fixed now. All right, so there's lots to talk about with the topic of the Holy Roman Empire. For those of you that don't really know what the Holy Roman Empire is, they say that it's neither holy, nor Roman, nor an empire. It's not an empire because it is actually a whole bunch of different kingdoms that are in alliance with each other, which makes it not really a true, there's not really a true emperor. But it is basically the Holy Roman Emperor is the protectorate of the Pope. So in a few weeks ago, when we were talking about Peter being the rock, a lot of this started basically when Jesus had the conversation with his disciples, and he was asking them who they thought he was. And when Peter said that he was the Son of God, then he told Peter that you are the rock, the foundation which my church will be built on. And so from there, Peter now has the authority to go and create a new church in Rome. And for the next couple hundred years, Christianity is illegal. Christians are being thrown into the lion's den. And Emperor Nero is killing tons of Christians. But over the next couple hundred years, Christianity becomes the official religion of Rome. Now that happened because of Constantine, and a lot of people know about that, but kind of past that point, a lot of people are pretty uninformed. So I can hear somebody mute their, what is this? Mute that. Okay, I muted it. All right, so I thought this was an interesting map to get us started of why was it necessary for the German barbarians and the Pope to join forces. It kind of seems strange that the Pope would have a bunch of barbarian pagans protecting him. And so that's kind of what we're talking about tonight. And in this map, you can see over in Hungary, there was Magyars invading into Central Europe. And up north, you had Vikings that were coming down and attacking along the coastlines. And you had the Moors in North Africa that had already taken over Spain and ruled it for 800 years. And so they were being attacked on all fronts. And basically, when the Roman Empire fell, there was no armies left to protect the people. And the Pope had a small army, and basically he kept Rome from being totally destroyed. And so from then on, basically, there was no Roman Empire, and the church in Rome was the only real government. The church had its own government separate from the Roman Empire. And once the Roman Empire fell, that structure of the church government was all that was left. Another thing that I thought was interesting, a lot of people like to say, like if you look in the background behind me, you can see the Pope is crowning a barbarian king. This is Charlemagne. But a lot of people don't realize that a lot of these kings were not really Christians when they started out. They actually were still used their pagan religion, and they mixed it together. So that's why we have things like Easter Sunday with rabbits and eggs and all these, like the Halloween holidays and things like that, because those were pagan holidays. I wanted to talk a little bit about Daniel 2. We brought this up quite a few times in the past, but in the dream, I think it was Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Is that right, Sam? Nebuchadnezzar the second. He has a dream, and Daniel interprets the dream. And in the dream, there's a figure of a man, and his head is of gold, and his chest and arms are of silver, and his belly and thigh is made of bronze, and the leg is of iron, and then there's feet of iron and clay, and then a rock comes and basically crushes the whole thing and takes up the whole world, it says. And so the rock is the church. And then, like we talked about, Jesus actually calls Peter the rock. And so the question we have is, are all the religions valid? And there's so many different sects. We have Catholicism, then it breaks into Catholicism and Orthodox. And then from there, there's all of these Protestant sects that come up. I've got a map of all the different Protestant sects here. And I'm saying sects, not sex, in case you're confused. Right here, there's a little graph of Protestantism, and you can see it breaks into Lutheranism, Anglicanism, and Calvinism. And then within Anglicanism, there's Episcopalian, Baptist, Methodist, Pentecostal. And I think it's really interesting to go back and to read about the formation of these. I was really surprised to find out that Baptists were killing people. They were probably not as much as the Catholics were, but I found out that when I was a kid growing up Southern Baptist, they told us we couldn't listen to music that had rock, like we couldn't listen to rock and roll, basically. And I was offended because of the hypocrisy. I mean, Robert was there. We were told we couldn't listen to our music, but then the preacher's kids will come in dancing to something very similar, some other rock. And we're thinking, okay, he's letting his kids listen to rock at home, but he's telling us we can't. And that's really one of the reasons why we started this podcast, is because me and Robert had a lot of experiences as kids growing up in church. And we had a lot of things that we felt like were hypocritical. And we just kind of wanted to talk it out and just see what's been written about these subjects before. So I found out that the Baptists actually murdered 43 people because they were playing music with instruments. And I was thinking, this is a time when they started to have chamber music where they're just singing. It was choirs using their voice. And the reason why is because they say in the Bible, you're only supposed to, it doesn't say you're only supposed to use the voice. It just says it didn't mention it. It didn't mention the instrument. So now we're going to murder you over it. I mean, that's just crazy. It said to sing, but it didn't say play the harp now.
That's almost like a Church of Christ, how they are
David
now.
Play a harp? Didn't David play a harp?
I know, but I know a bunch of Church of Christ guys. They will not listen to Christian music that has instruments in it, but they'll listen to any other music that has instruments in it. I've been to funerals where if you've got songs to play for a wedding or something and it has instruments in it, they won't play it.
My grandma
even the early church
because of that.
Can you hear me on there?
The early church back in I don't know, when, Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, the church played instruments. They had organs and, harpsichords. And
I would be willing to bet. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I would be willing to bet they had the drums.
Cody, you got two devices on in the same room and it's echoing back and forth. Do you have an iPad
I'll
on?
take mine.
On here is small.
You guys can't
Anyway.
hear each other.
She gonna have to drive up the road.
Okay, we can hear you now. Go ahead and say what you're gonna say.
Well, I was gonna say that the Ethiopian Bible that they have, at one point, they had said, that it was drums was.
It's very difficult to understand what you're saying.
I just want to mention the drums. I think the drums have been around a long time. I don't know about harps or instruments, but I would say that there was a lot of drums in religious culture probably from the beginning of time. I don't know that though, but it's.
Well, let's just go off of what the Bible says. I mean, I know for sure that I'm pretty sure David played a lyre. Isn't that what?
Yeah,
there's
there's harps mentioned. Yeah, there's harps mentioned. There's brass instruments mentioned. Of course, they had horns and stuff, not necessarily for singing, but echoing, a charge or something like that. But yeah,
shofar.
I mean,
shofar.
psalteries, lyres, stuff like that. I mean, they had all those things. So
Coming out of Egypt,
definitely their
I'm sure they had
culture.
everything Egypt had.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they went to Babylon, Syria, and Egypt, so I imagine they had every instrument imaginable in the known world.
Now, I really don't know a whole lot about this particular history part of it, but I guess I was thinking, if I'm remembering some church history stuff, that the official Holy Roman Empire didn't really start until Charlemagne. Is that right?
Yes. That's actually what's going on in the background behind me here.
Okay. And I know back then
haven't-
they basically, if you were baptized, they considered you a Christian. Didn't matter what you did, you could murder people and do all kinds of heathenistic things. But if you'd dunk yourself in the water, then they considered you a Christian. So pretty much that was a very weak discipleship for sure.
Well, the main thing was everyone was illiterate, and so they couldn't read it for themselves. So they're going off of what the preacher's telling them, and if the preacher can derive some kind of benefit from really where they started going off the rails. Here's a timeline of the Holy Roman Empire. You can see it started with the fall of the Western Roman Empire, and then Charlemagne is crowned by Pope Leo III in 800 AD. Shortly after that's when we start seeing the Crusades, about 1000 AD. And then you got the Mongolian hordes coming in about 1300. And so one thing I wanted to talk about was the Counter-Reformation and the Protestant Reformation. So right here's a picture of Martin Luther. Martin Luther is one of the first people to really push for the Bible to be written in German language. And we've talked about several times where people that had their Bible written in their own language, the Bible was then used as kindling to burn them at the stake. And so what was the press called? Not the
Gutenberg.
The Gutenberg press allowed for the mass production of Bibles written in English. And I was kind of wondering, like, why don't you hear about these being written in German? And it's not written in German, it's written in English. Because you have all these old English Bibles, but you don't see a whole lot of German Bibles. And the reason I felt like because right here, Otto's father was a Saxon king. So it was written in Saxon. And then that language became Old English, just like we always hear about Anglo-Saxons. England was taken over by the Saxons. And even though a lot of these kings of Germany were not English, like you would think, their ancestor, Otto, was a Saxon. So they all had a common ancestor that was Saxon. And that's why all these Bibles were being written in Old English, not necessarily German. So it's old.
Well,
There's part of a old Gutenberg original Bible over in Salem Springs.
Huh.
Not
Well-
Eureka Springs. Eureka Springs has part of one.
I would add what I learned on this, that I did this study with Billy Graham and the Holy Roman Empire, and the question that came up was that the Catholic Church at some point had decided that you could not receive salvation by grace or faith alone, and that the doctrine or whatever it was, that was should have been wrong, but that was given by the Pope. And I think that was around Charlemagne's era that they were determining this. And the other problem that I saw that came up amongst some of the ministers right now was that they were wrong on that, because they also said that they didn't have couldn't go by grace or faith alone for salvation, because they didn't have the Gospels. So they had to go to the priest to have him do it for them. And I think Kid had mentioned earlier something about that you could buy your way into heaven or get in salvation by good deeds. And this was very contradictory for the Jews from Israel at earlier times when Constantine was just starting to try to make this whole Roman Empire, and they had banished the Jews for maybe 5 or 10 years during that era, and then they came back and they were trying to converge the new Christians with the old Jewish religions to have this Roman theology, I guess. But that they did have, Paul wrote Romans, and it was the Gospels. It was a reformation of the Gospels, of the good news. So I think they were very confused from about 300 to Charlemagne's era, and I think that's what they're lacking in Roman Catholicism now. I'm not.
I want to touch on something you said there. The Council of Trent. Whenever there was a revival at the foundation, what's the name of the guy who gave the message with the choir?
Just recently, the
Yeah.
Steve Barry.
Steve Barry. I mentioned that we were talking about the Holy Roman Empire and the Pope, and how exactly the kings of Europe got mixed in with the papacy. And he mentioned the Council of Trent and told me to look that up. And so right here, I have a link to 9 things you should know about the Council of Trent. And some of the things Cody was just talking about, they had this meeting that basically lasted for 18 years. And in the first year, Martin Luther was supposed to go there and basically plead his case to the Catholics of what his argument was. And they were supposed to debate what the Protestants believed and figure out basically how it fit in with their beliefs. And so they met for 18 years to try to figure out exactly what the Protestants' protest was about. And basically what they came up with was just what Cody said, that they believe that you should be able to get more salvation for good works you've done, basically. And the Protestants, they kind of rely on that scene where Jesus is on the cross with the thief, and he tells him, "You will be in paradise with me today." And that means he didn't have to do anything. He's nailed to a cross. He can't do anything. So he didn't have to do anything to get his salvation. And also in this study, I was also looking at the Free Will Baptists, because that Pastor Sam is a pastor at the Free Will Baptist, and I started looking up the origins of that. And part of that is the idea that Jesus died for the whole world, everyone. You've probably heard a lot, at least I have lately heard a lot about the 144,000, the select that would be taken up during the rapture. And that basically works out to about 12,000 people per 12 tribes. So for each one of the 12 tribes, you get 1,200 soldiers. That works out to 144,000. So that's an army. That's Christ's army, essentially. And there's some of the Anabaptists, I believe that there was a select. They call it the elect. The elect are going to go to heaven, and everyone else isn't. And so some of the questions that pop up when you're talking like that is, what would be the point of being an evangelist? What would be the point of going out and preaching if there's only so many people that are going to be saved? What's the point of trying to save everyone if there's only a few that are going to be saved? And their answer to that was, you somehow get more merit, more treasure in heaven if you go through the motions of saving someone knowing that they're going to be lost. But I even before I understood the doctrine of the free will Baptist, I believed that anyone could be saved. I've never really felt any other way. And you know, sometimes when you're talking about ancient Jewish history, Cody was saying something about this earlier, that when Jesus spoke to the crowd, he told them it wasn't for them. Was that when he fed the 5,000?
I believe so. And they were following him through the desert, I believe. So I mean, I didn't go back and study on that, but yes, there was a message in there that, you know, the time was now, and the transition was, the Jews were the ones who were going to have to do the repenting. And those people weren't Jews. I don't think that was following him. I'm not sure what they were. Maybe somebody knows. Do you guys know? Sam, do you know who the 5,000 were? What origin?
They would have been Jews.
You sure? All right, maybe they
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, Sam, why do you think that it seems like whenever Jesus is talking about the Jews, he's usually talking about the Pharisees? He just flat out calls them the Jews. Then he talks about some of the people were afraid of the Jews, but the people that were afraid, they were Jews as well. So it's kind of weird that he kind of has that difference. Like, he refers to the people of Jerusalem as being like they're afraid of the Jews, and he's talking specifically about the head Jews, the Pharisees.
Absolutely. Well, there was a kind of a sect of them that kind of identified themselves as the I guess the more Jewish of all of them, because they were more religious in their doctrine and belief and stuff like that. They spent their time studying scriptures. That, you know, they basically felt like themselves more important. Maybe they were more Jewish. But I mean, it's no different than today. You know, we see different people who feel, you know, they look down their noses at people. You have all the different Jewish tribes look down their noses at each other. You know, different classes will look down their nose on each other.
Native Americans are very much like that. If you are very much into the ceremonies, you're more Native. And if you can't speak your language and you don't know anything about the dances, you're less Native. You're barely Native.
Oh, if you got blonde hair or pale skin, you're not Native enough.
The same way with the Christian world is just, you know, if you don't go to church every Sunday, and if you don't go to church every Sunday evening, Wednesday, and do all this, that, and the other, then you aren't Christian enough.
Or not a certain kind of church.
Yeah. If you don't go to my church, then you're wrong.
Yeah.
You know.
There's a lot of churches to choose from. I don't know how someone would know if you're going to church or not.
The Christian religion is one of the worst about it, though. I mean, you drive through Grove and there's so many churches, like, and everybody, oh, they're a good Christian person. When you hear someone say they're a good Christian person, they're not a good person at all. I mean, most Most of the time when you hear someone say, oh, Bill, Bill and Barbara, they're good Christian people. It's like, yeah, but they probably aren't.
I've always said this to me. Some of the meanest people I've ever met go to church.
Yeah.
I have to agree with that, wholeheartedly. That and I have felt that way a lot of times. That sometimes I just felt like I wasn't good enough to be in church. I don't, you know what I mean? And that's a terrible way to think. But sometimes you get up and you're like, oh, my clothes look bad, or what, how bad I did last week, and I just haven't forgiven myself. And just not realize the importance of going, and that's got to be, and after when I come to terms with it, that I'm not a very good Christian sometimes, and it's the guilt and shame that I've learned in these meeting rooms and these rehabs and stuff. That's the part you got to get over, and it reminds me of something the kid had said the other day about Adam and Eve. It wasn't so much that they ate the apple or did the knowledge, but that they hid from God and then said, well, we're naked. And he's like, who told you were naked? That's kind of that's the way I feel a lot of times, like I'm hiding because I realize I'm naked instead of just getting out and going to church and, doing your good works and repenting and just coming before God with your problems.
Yes, it's very important. Like in the Catholic belief, they believe that you're supposed to confess your sins to the Father, to a priest. But I've heard some Protestant preachers talking about what that confession means, and basically what it means to confess and to repent is to not hide your sins. It's not to just tell one guy and then go about your business and it's okay. It's to go around telling people, I used to smoke meth. I used to be addicted to porn. Look what God did for me. He released me of it and I'm no longer enslaved. That's what he wants you to do, is to be honest with people and tell them flat out, this is what I did and I'm not doing it anymore.
I've been there too. I struggle.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's like, the whole, like, you always hear people, they'll talk about, oh, the guy that goes to this church is covered in tattoos. He's got a beard down to his chest and he's been to prison, but he's there, but he's sitting by himself because all the other folk who are good Christian people, they're sitting there judging him. But he's not hiding. He's not hiding anymore.
I would say, out here at the Foundation Church, I've not found that there. I think that's why I enjoy it so much. It's why I'm there. There's so much to be humble and a lot of love and a lot of judging. And I have been to a couple of these churches, and the Mountain Movers, man, they're awesome. But I mean, I lasted about 45 minutes, and out here at the Foundation, I found a home. So also COS, man, I used to love that church, but there was a lot of transformation over there. It was a good place to become a good Christian and get in and work some steps, but just after a while, just didn't feel like home. And I just appreciate this one, the tabernacle out here, or the Foundation. So, Robert, I haven't seen you there, but I mean, I would like to say that there's not a lot of judging that goes on out there, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, I've heard good things about your church, Sam. Some of the ones that Cody's mentioned I've been to, like the Mountain Movers. When I first moved back here from Georgia, Tiffany tried them out. And this has been about 14 years now. But I just moved back here. I'd never been there. And Tiffany went there a few times. And I was about to become very unpleasant with him because he was constantly calling her and hounding her about going to the church and everything. You know, I'd literally only been home like a few months, and I was about to go have words with the guy. But and I, but
I've heard my girlfriend calls it a cult. I don't.
But I've tried, you know, the church out here. I haven't tried it. I went as a guest to the church over by my house, and I didn't like the way they treated the kids. And then I went to, you know, church with my in-laws and listened to that preacher promise his congregation he wouldn't embarrass them, and then turn around and flat out call them a bunch of cowards if they didn't do what they just said they were going to do. And you know, he's embarrassing the whole congregation. And I've had experiences at a couple of the other churches where, you know, people are the nicest and greet you, shake your hand, then you see them at the store or something in town and they're complete assholes to you.
I actually, speaking of how they treat the kids, that's actually the reason I stopped going to COS. Because every week I would ask my daughter, like, you know, what Bible verse did they teach you about or something? And she would always like not even have any clue about any Bible verse being read. And I'm in line one day eating a hot dog, and this kid is just kicking this ball and bouncing it off of people's heads. And nobody says, I'm starting to get mad because this kid is like assaulting my daughter while we're in line to eat. And I figured one of the adults should talk to this kid. One of the people that are like in charge here need to say something. I was about to go over and jerk this kid up by his ear and tell him, hey, you know, this is how you act. And I got sick of nobody that was in charge seemed to notice it. And it was really aggravating me. Well, then the next week I come in and the guy who was in charge, the dad of that kid who didn't say anything, sat there and watched him kick a ball off my daughter's head. He's the youth leader now. And it's just like, if he can't discipline his own child, I don't want my kid in that class.
One of the qualifications here is rule your house well.
Yeah, you know, I've always tried to tell my kids, you know, that it's a personal choice. It's a personal relationship. Don't base your beliefs or your unbeliefs about God and about anything like that based on what other people are doing or saying to you. You've got to figure this out yourself. You got to make your own decisions and follow your own path.
That right there, Robert.
The problem is my daughter said that to some other people who were at a church that we have mentioned in the last minutes, and they, I guess, about got crappy with her and basically about called her like a blasphemer and heathen. I was just like, that's why you don't talk about those things to other people. You keep them to yourself.
Okay, Sam.
I've heard guys say stuff like that, though, that if you don't go to our church, then you can't go to heaven. You're not right with God. And I've asked them, I said, well, what did people do before your church came along?
Yeah.
Yeah, it hadn't been around that long. Hey,
yeah.
Okay, Sam, now let's pin this down because Robert's bringing up a great point. This is what the Protestant Reformation is all about. This is why we had problems when we were kids. The preacher told us when we were kids that we couldn't interpret the Bible, that he is the preacher and he would interpret the Bible and tell us what it said. And Robert says, no, read it for yourself, have a personal relationship. And that right there is the crux of the whole issue between the Catholics. And I've saw several debates in the last few weeks as researching this, that yes, the YouTuber that was Catholic and the YouTuber that was Protestant butted heads on that very issue. The Catholic priest that I listen to flat out feels like he's not as educated as his bishop or cardinal or whatever, and that he should concede his opinion to them. And that's actually one of the things they talked about at the Council of Trent was that you should actually that was part of Martin Luther's idea But he also contradicted himself in that your emotions and your judgment should not supersede what the Bible says. That's what.
Can I make 2 points before I forget them on this subject? One, I know my father used to always tell me, one of Peter's things, and he made a very good point that I had to make my own decisions, because Peter said that you could teach no man the Bible, that he would speak through his own heart at whatever time in his life that God wanted to intervene. Also, the other thing was that I learned in Florida and in some of our recovery churches, and a decision that we were all children of God, including my own children, and that God wanted to have a personal relationship with each one of my children and with me, and that I was going to have to accept that and accept each one of my children's own personal relationships with God and his destiny and his timing for them, and for me to accept it.
Okay.
Yeah. I wanted to point out, you'd mentioned something about the Council of Trent and kind of some of the things that kind of came out of it. I know one thing was Johann Tetzel. He was a big friar. And I think he was the one who came up, if I remember my church history right, with indulgences back in the 1500s.
I got a whole section on
and
that.
They would sell indulgences within the Catholic Church, and so I believe that was where a huge income for the Catholic Church was during that particular time period. Even before that too, they would sell blanket absolutions for sins, and whatever it was, they would basically have those things for sale. And I know that that was something that according to history, was Martin Luther had a real problem with, is that salvation doesn't come from a state or church given indulgence or something like that. It only comes through Christ, sola scripture, sola faith, all that stuff.
Yeah. And another side of that coin is investiture, because the person in charge is supposed to be passed down from Paul, right? Paul the Rock,
Peter.
or Peter, yeah, the Rock, and so
later and they still
on,
have the tradition. Oh, I say the Catholic Church still has the tradition, because I've asked several people of what the throne that the Pope sits on. They call it Peter's chair, and for centuries there was the chair that was supposedly was the chair Peter sat in when he preached in Acts. That and anytime the Pope makes a statement from that chair, it becomes the canon, whatever it is, whether it's an indulgence, absolution, or even a change to what the Bible says, that anybody that understands, they basically have to change whatever they do. And that's why whenever the Pope comes out with these different opinions from time to time, it's big news within the Catholic world for sure.
Let me read a paragraph here about investiture. It talks about several of the things you just brought up. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century, significant changes took place within the churches of the Germanic successor states, which generally ceased to look to the Pope in Rome or ecumenical councils for guidance. Instead, nobles and especially anointed kings assumed numerous Christian duties, including the protection and foundation of churches and abbeys, which they had often built and endowed. Although the canon law declaring that bishops were to be elected by the clergy and people of their future diocese was never abrogated, it was ignored. Bishops and abbots were nominated and installed by rulers in a ceremony known since the second half of the 11th century as investiture. The consecration of the newly minted bishop by the ecclesiastical superior then usually followed. So if the Pope in Peter's chair is not really in charge, and any king, even in Mexico, when they had the Inquisition in Mexico, they were going around and they were killing Jews. They killed 43 Jews in Mexico City for practicing Judaism. And so they could literally, they didn't have to listen. It's called a papal bull. Whenever the
Yes.
Pope sends out like a decree, it's called a papal bull. That's like got his stamp on it. And if you're in Mexico or you're in Spain and a lot of times, like if you're in Egypt or you're in Turkey, they would just ignore that, just completely ignore it and just kind of do whatever they wanted. And so I'm not saying that we expect them to be perfect. I think what we're trying to say is that they're fallible. The problem is infallibility. The fact that they say you have to listen to everything and your life is on the line. Whenever you're clear, like one of the big problems that Luther had was a lot of these bishops were not educated. And so they're just kind of willy-nilly doing whatever they want, and they can barely even read the scripture for themselves.
Well, that was another thing is like I know a couple of things I was going to touch on. The thing I sent you earlier, Kit, one of the popes mentioned was Leo X, famous for his lavish spending during his reign, became patron of the arts. But after the church's wallet got a little bit lighter, Leo X then convinced believers they could buy their way into heaven, selling indulgence that would reduce their sins.
It's very difficult to remember any of these for me. I tried to study the popes, but it starts to all kind of go together, especially because they're coming up with their own names and stuff. Like Benedict, that's probably not even really his name.
No, they all changed their names to a papal name. But another thing was like, you talking about like some of these higher ups in the church not being educated. Well, it's like when we're talking about Borges, whatever. He became Pope. And I swear the guy.
Are you talking about
family,
Borges?
Yeah, the Borges family. And they were practically like they were almost like just a crime family. But he became a cardinal, then became a pope, assigned his son to be a cardinal. His son later became a pope. Neither one of them served as popes for very long.
Yeah.
And they, did all kinds of crime. There's some rumors of incest, some children, all kinds of stuff going on. But
This guy had
they're buying their way in, and other people could buy their way into having that power of being a cardinal or bishop.
This Julius II says he had so much syphilis on his body that no one could kiss his hand from prostitutes.
Yep.
Now I was reading one deal that there was a guy that who became a pope when he was 12.
Yeah,
and he became pope 3 different times.
And that's most likely because he's related to someone and he's holding on to the crown. It's like no different than a hereditary kingship in France.
Yeah.
There's a couple of other things I wanted to get to. We only got about 10 minutes left. One of the things I want to talk about was Freemasonry in the church and what they thought about it. I wanted to read just a short little thing here about the Church of Scotland and what the Protestants versus the Catholics thought about Freemasonry. Because the main reason I wanted to talk about this is because one of the main things I wanted to get into was the flag of the Holy Roman Empire. My page is not loading. I'm waiting for the menu to pop up here. For some reason it's not popping up. But anyway, the flag has two eagles on it. It's a two-headed eagle. And what that eagle stands for is the unification, 2 parts of the church, the religious side of the empire and the secular side of the empire, the kingship and the priest. And that mirrors a lot of what we see in the Old Testament. Aaron was the priest, and Moses was kind of the leader, the authoritarian. And so let's look at this page here called the two-headed eagle. Okay, in this picture right here, you have all the different kings of the Germanic empires. And in the center, you have Christ, and then you have the two eagle heads in the background. It's called the Quaternion eagle. Now, this later on becomes the symbol of the Habsburgs. The Habsburgs is a family, a dynasty, and basically they're the first empire. Basically they marry into all the kingships in the whole of Europe. So it doesn't matter if you're in Spain, if you're in Belgium, you're in Germany, you're in Hungary, you're in Austria. They're all cousins. They're all married to each other. And so things start to get really complicated around this time. But these Habsburgs, some of them were Masons. And later on, the Masons end up taking that same symbol. I actually have right here. Right here, I have the handbook of the Freemasons written by Albert Pike. It's called Morals and Dogma. And right there, you can see the double eagle with a light up above. It's a pyramid with the number 33 in there. And Jesus was 32 when he died. And 33 is, in my opinion, I actually asked God this one time, and I'm not joking, a lightning bolt came out of the sky and it thundered, and then a light shined on me. And it was pretty it was freaky. But when I asked God what the number 33 meant in this book, what God told me was, I was actually asking two questions at the same time. I was asking God, how can two enemies live in the same house and live together? Because I just recently found out, like, as far as astrology and the stars and all that go, I'm my brother's worst enemy. Even though I've helped him all my life, I'm his mortal enemy. And I asked God, how can two enemies live in the same house? And I was also asking, what does this 33 mean? And right then, thunderbolt came out of this. It was a nice day. There wasn't a storm out. And I heard a big thunder crash, lightning, and then light came down from around a cloud and shined on me. And to me, God just answered my question. God is the 33rd. It's deification, the becoming of going to the other side, going to heaven. And what the answer was, how could the enemies live in the household? Because it was God's plan. It's not my plan. It's not his plan. We have to just let God's plan work out. I mean, we're not in charge of it. So we just gotta. Are
you a Mason?
No, I believe you have, in order to be a Mason, I think you have to be related to a Mason. Unless you're Don King. Apparently Don King is a Mason. He was a master Mason. Can you believe that? Don King?
What?
Yeah. That really blew my mind. But apparently you can be voted in by a high up Mason, and you're automatically good. You don't have to go through all the steps. Apparently you can go straight to being a master Mason. And apparently Don King did that. But anyway,
I know they vote you in because I know you can be voted in. A friend of mine is a Mason, and I've asked him a ton of questions about it. And I know what they do when they vote you in. They've got, I guess, a secret ballot type of place where you grab a ball and you put it in. And as long as it's 100%, you get to go in. If you don't, they have a black ball. And if you put the black ball in, then you've been the term blackballed, then you can't join.
Oh, wow.
That's supposedly where
term came from there.
That's supposedly where that comes from. But yeah, I mean, that's their tradition. They do, is what I've been told. They don't tell you a lot of traditions either. You know, I know they claim secession through Hiram Abiff that built the first temple. I know that. The built Solomon's temple.
Yeah. Well, these Habsburg family, there was quite a bit of they were the emperors of the empire, but some of them were Masons, and Catholics hated the Masons bad, and they were enemies of each other. And his wife, even one of the Masons, one of the Habsburgs, his wife was queen, and she made it illegal to be a Mason, but her husband was a Mason. And it was kind of complicated because it was kind of like a social drinking club. I think a little bit of it was getting away from your wife. It seemed like was some of it.
Well,
But
the Flintstones had their version.
well, it's a
That's right.
maternal order, right? Before I go back to what the Protestants thought of the Masons, I just wanted to show you guys this conspiracy theory of that George Floyd had the Mason's eagle tattooed on his chest, and it said "From Order Chaos" or "From Chaos Order." And I don't know if that's true or not. I tried to find a picture of it. This is what I came up with. To me, that just looks like a two-headed eagle. It doesn't look like, I don't know if it actually has the 33 in there or not. But there's rumors that George Floyd was a Mason, part of the Illuminati. And basically, he sacrificed himself to create a movement, I guess. He's a little too on drugs for, I don't know if I believe that. He was pretty wasted before all that happened. But maybe it was an act. I don't know. Maybe he was actually an upstanding citizen and took one for the team.
It seemed like when I was in the Army, there was a lot of Masons, especially, higher ranking guys like officers and stuff like that. It seemed like I saw a lot of Mason rings.
I was hoping that David was going to be
stickers.
on the show because he went to Germany recently, and he's probably seen some of these things, these sites, and he told me that he met the guy that, and he had got his card, the guy that was over all the Freemasons in all of Europe. And apparently that's a guy he met at the airport, or no, it was at a school. He was trying to be a substitute teacher, and he met the guy who is the head of all the Freemasons in Europe. The part that I was wanting to talk about was down here on Masonry and the Church. Okay, I wanted to read this out loud to you. The Church of England does not have a clear stance on the matter. While the Church had always been closely linked to Freemasonry since the 1980s, some Anglican bishops and pastors have made negative judgments about Freemasons. For theological reasons. In July 1987, George Synod endorsed a report which considered the compatibility of Freemasonry within Christianity. The report stated that the reflections of the working group itself reveal unstandable differences of opinion between those who are Freemasons and those who are not. Whilst the former fully agree that the report shows that there are clear difficulties to be faced by Christians who are Freemasons. The latter are of the mind that the report points to a number of very fundamental reasons to question the compatibility of Freemasonry and Christianity. The Church of Scotland does not ban congregants from becoming Freemasons. But in 1989, the General Assembly said there were very real theological difficulties with the Church of Scotland members being Freemasons. In 1985, Conference of the Methodist Church of Great Britain said that Freemasonry competed with Christian beliefs, and they discouraged but did not prohibit Methodists from becoming Freemasons, and asked Methodist Freemasons to reconsider their membership of Freemasonry. The conference banned the use of Methodist premises for Masonic meetings, though in 1989, the source reported some Masonic meetings were taking place on Methodist premises. The 1996 Methodist Conference revisited the 1985 position in the light of developments in Freemasonry, concluding that there were still hesitations about the wisdom of Methodists joining the Masonic Lodge, though it affirmed there was no absolute bar on the Methodists being a Freemason. I think a lot of this may have to do with we talked about it about 5 or 6 weeks ago. I think we talked a little bit about a hoax. Do you remember there being a hoax? In this book right here, Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike, he talks about Lucifer, and he talks about the light bearer, and you can easily make it seem like they're talking about devil worship, but they're actually talking about defeating Lucifer, and they're saying just the opposite. But if you manipulate the context a little bit, it's easy to make them look like devil worshippers. And there was a guy in the late 1800s after the Civil War. I can't think of what his name was. We've got a whole page on it here somewhere. But basically, this guy created a hoax where he claimed that there was a Masonic manifesto that planned out the next 3 world wars and the war on terror and the destruction of Islam. And basically the whole point was it even talked about getting the Nazis, and this is way before the Nazis even existed, I think, but they were talking about getting the Germans and the Russians to fight each other and how to make that happen, and basically to simultaneously bring down the Catholic Church, bring down the power of the Catholic Church, and to destroy Russia and Germany. And it all came, it's really easy to see it as a valid conspiracy theory. But as I did the research, I found out it was a guy who was writing it as a hoax. But all of it came true. So it's very confusing. He was actually a comedian, and it was totally a hoax in the newspaper. But it turns out all the things he predicted in this hoax all came true. He predicted World War I, World War II, and the War on Terror. Basically laid out the next 100 years of history. Before we go, it's a little bit past time. We've done an hour. I wanted to bring up 2 things you might not have heard of before we leave. I found this video right here talks about how anybody can read Hebrew. Ancient Hebrew was just like the pictographs on the walls in Egypt. Whenever they this chart right here shows the evolution of Hebrew into the modern block letters. And the reason why it's so hard to read now is because when they were in captivity in Babylon, their language changed to characters like the ones they have now. But if you go back to ancient Egypt, to the time of Jacob in Israel, the language they would have been writing down would have looked more like the pictographs, the hieroglyphics. And actually, you can just look right here and you can see it's a picture of a bull. And it looked like it was a bull's horns. The A was upside down. So the A like this, alpha, used to be upside down like that. And it was the horns. And you can see, basically the guy says anyone could read Hebrew in Jacob's day. And he talks about how it's harder and harder to read it throughout time, and that's why it's so confusing now. But apparently it was all pictographs originally. I thought that was really interesting. I didn't realize that. So it shows a direct evolution from their captivity when they used to look at the hieroglyphics in Egypt. Another thing I thought was really interesting is I found out that their maps are flipped. Like we always talk about, like when they left Eden, they went east of Eden to the land of Nod. But apparently their map is not oriented by north. Their version of north would have been where the sun comes up, and south would have been where the sun sets. And so their whole map would be flipped. And there's a picture of how their map might look. The Dead Sea normally would be running vertically, but in this map, you can see it running horizontal. So when they're crossing the Jordan, they're going to their north. And of course, they wouldn't have used the word north. That's an English word. So I have a link here that takes you to a place where it teaches you how the words that they use for east, west, south, and north. So that's something more that we could look into sometime, or you might want to keep in mind for future studies. I'm not sure how it would change how things are, but also in archaeology news, there was a big discovery. They say this is bigger than the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. They found a little tiny lead tablet. It's only 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters. So this thing's smaller than a postage stamp, but it's a piece of lead that's been folded over. And I guess they've had it for years, but they never had a way to open it because they knew if they opened it, they would destroy the contents. And so what they did, there's a company in Hungary that that can scan through lead. And so they took millions and millions of scans, pieced them together, and they were able to read the letters on the inside of this folded lead tablet. And it says, it has the name of Yahweh, and it says, cursed, cursed, cursed by the God Yahweh. And basically the reason why it's significant is a lot of people think that the Hebrews didn't have their own written language that far back. In the time of Moses and Jacob and Joshua, they thought that they didn't have a written language at that time. And they also, a lot of people think that the Jews were not in Israel. They have, like, let's say the Egyptians, the Arab Egyptians, a lot of Arabs, Palestinians, they say these Jews just came in 1942, back in the 40s, and they just started taking over our land, and they're not really from here. But this proves that there were people speaking, writing Hebrew, using the name of Yahweh in the time of Joshua. And this was found near Jericho, the place they think was Jericho.
Oh, wow.
And so this is definitive proof that they really were there at that time. And they really, during the time of Moses, they were writing their own language. So they say that that's actually bigger than the Dead Sea Scrolls because the Dead Sea Scrolls was found in Egypt, and this is actually found in the Promised Land. And it's been dated, so.
Wow.
I'm just as impressed about the fact that it's a little piece of lead.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
You
so
know, you always see tablets or papyrus or some sort of parchment, but you find a little piece of lead with carving, writing on it.
and it makes you
Wow.
wonder why someone would, it's a little curse tablet. So it makes you wonder, did they put it on someone and hide it there? Or like what?
Wrote
were
it,
they doing
tried to curse somebody.
Right.
And it seems like lead would have been pretty valuable. I don't know how hard it'd been to find it and mine it back then, but
I think
mean,
tin was
you-
the thing that was hard to find.
well, I know the Roman Empire, the Romans used tin. I don't know when they started. They needed tin for bronze, I think, to mix with to make bronze.
Right.
And I think that was a big thing of taking over England was they had a lot of tin up in England.
Exactly. Another big difference between Protestants and the Catholics in the Council of Trent was the Apocrypha. This right here is a chart that shows who believes in the Apocrypha. Basically, the Apocrypha are books of the Bible that were taken out during the Council of Nicaea. And these are Jewish writings. And I'm not familiar with any of them. There are some in the Dead Sea Scrolls that I thought were part of the Apocrypha, but this is obviously something different because you don't see anything in here about, what's his name? Enoch or the Gospel of Thomas or the Gospel of Judah, or not Judah, but Judas Iscariot. But right here you see the Maccabees, 1, 2, 3. The Maccabees would have been, I think, am I wrong in thinking the Maccabees was during the Babylonian times?
That would have been during the Intertestament times, I think, or at least the the Maccabean Jew revolt.
Oh, yeah, they're after 70 AD, right? They're after the destruction of Jerusalem.
Before that,
Before that,
yeah.
I have to look into that. I read about it, but it's been a while. So let's discuss.
That's where we get
wanna- Say what?
That's where we get the menorah from, I think, isn't it?
Yes, and that has something to do with the holiest of holies being desecrated,
Hanukkah.
and then having to purify the temple for 7 days. So let's do that. Next week, can you guys get together the third Thursday of this month? Let's see. That
I'll
is
rely on you to text me.
that's the 18th, August 18th.
I think so.
Okay, well, let's just pivot off of this into the Apocrypha, and let's just talk about the Maccabees. Who were the Maccabees? In about 3 weeks. Anybody have a problem with reading about the Apocrypha? I know I have had people that tell me that it's a sin to read about other people's religions. For instance, I've read about I read the Tibetan Book of the Dead one time, and for me it was much more modern than I thought it would be. And I tried to get a Baptist to read it, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and they basically told me I was sinning by even reading that. What are you?
You're also
sinning?
told
Are we
it was
sinning by even reading the Apocrypha?
No.
You're also told it was a sin for listening to music.
Sin
Yeah,
to dance.
that's true.
Yeah, at least we're not those Baptists that put everyone to death for playing instruments. I'm
Oh
glad.
man, yeah.
Hey, have you watched Keep Sweet?
Uh-uh.
It's about a sect of the Mormons. You'll hate people after that. It's on Netflix.
Yeah, I just like Jesus, what Jesus said. I pretty much just read the red letters if I can avoid the rest.
Yeah.
Okay, guys.
Here's the deal. Why would you be scared of something if you don't believe in it anyway?
That's exactly what I was saying about the whole deal with Magic the Gathering being evil. It's like who's,
Well,
gi-
Yes.
who's giving it the
is this-
power? The person who's afraid of it, or the person who thinks it's just a card game?
Well,
I mean,
it
you
was the
read-
same
you
way when
read-
Harry Potter came out. A
Yeah.
guy I used to work with, they were hell bent against it because it dealt with witches. It's like, if you actually watch it, they're children. And it goes back to my mind, it goes back to something only has as much power as you give it.
Right.
Yes. I remember that whenever that came out, everybody was like, "Oh, you can't do that. Can't let your kids watch that." So, and then they were the same people that loved Lord of the Rings because C.S. Lewis wrote it.
Yeah.
I'm like, guys, there's no difference here.
Yeah, they're Tolkien, and it's just the same side of the coin as J.K. Rowling.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, then. Well, I will text you guys, and I'll let you know when the time is coming up. August 18th, we'll be talking about the Apocrypha. Love you guys. Have a great month. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. If we don't see you at the foundation first.
Night.
See ya.
I'll try to come by sometime and visit the church.
Yeah, that'd be great. We're getting to where we're almost going every night of the week. I think they got something on Thursday. They got something on Wednesday. They got 2 things on Sunday. We've been going a lot. Hey, they got good food. I'll tell you. Sam will tell you. They always got good food. Hey, isn't that men's breakfast coming up soon, Sam?
Yeah, it's Saturday.
This Saturday? Robert,
Yeah.
this Saturday, let's go eat breakfast up there.
Okay. Just remind me.
What time does it start, Sam?
7:30.
7:30, breakfast. All right, see you guys. Bye.
Thanks.
Good night.